At 7:42 this morning in Washington, an emergency intelligence briefing reportedly triggered one of the most tense moments inside the Pentagon in years. According to multiple battlefield leaks, Russia has been secretly feeding Iran real-time intelligence on the exact movements of US forces across the Middle East, including surveillance coverage, radar gaps, and the operational patterns of American bases. Within hours, the impact was already visible. Iranian hypersonic missiles and coordinated drone waves allegedly slipped through layers of US air defenses, striking radar installations and targeting infrastructure connected to Israel's military network. If this information proves accurate, it signals something far more alarming than a successful attack. It suggests that America's greatest battlefield advantage, the element of surprise, may have just been exposed. Mainstream media is still treating this like a minor story. So subscribe right now, because what you're about to hear may reveal why the balance of power in the Middle East could be shifting faster than Washington expected. In the next 12 minutes, I'm going to break down 3 critical realities that most media outlets are still avoiding. First, we'll examine the evidence suggesting Russia may be providing battlefield intelligence that changes the entire strategic equation in the Middle East. Second, we'll analyze how Iranian missiles and drone operations managed to penetrate systems once considered nearly untouchable. And finally, at the end of this video, I'll outline the 3 possible scenarios that could reshape the balance of power in the region, including the one outcome Washington fears the most. To understand why this situation is causing such deep concern among military planners, we need to break it down step by step. Because what is unfolding here is not simply another regional clash. If the reports circulating in strategic circles are even partially accurate, we could be witnessing a fundamental shift in the military balance of the Middle East. Let's start with what analysts are calling evidence point 1, the intelligence pipeline. According to several defense observers and leaked assessments discussed in policy circles, the key factor may not be Iran's missiles or drones themselves. Iran has possessed advanced missile technology for years. What appears to have changed is the accuracy and timing of those attacks. Former intelligence officials have repeatedly warned that modern warfare is no longer just about weapons, it's about information dominance. Military historian Professor Andrew Basevich once explained it this way. In modern conflict, the side that controls battlefield awareness controls the tempo of the war. If a nation suddenly gains access to high-quality battlefield intelligence, satellite tracking, radar coverage gaps, patrol patterns, the entire equation changes overnight. And that is exactly the concern emerging now. Multiple defense reports suggest that Russian surveillance networks, including satellites, maritime monitoring systems, and electronic listening posts, may be feeding critical situational data to Iranian command structures. This kind of information would allow Iranian planners to understand exactly when American defenses are strongest and when they are most vulnerable. Think about what that means. Instead of launching blind attacks and hoping something gets through, Iranian forces could potentially time their missile launches and drone waves to coincide with the smallest defensive windows. That would explain something that has puzzled analysts in recent days. Reports indicate that several Iranian strikes managed to penetrate advanced air defense layers, damaging radar facilities and disrupting surveillance systems in the region. For decades, the assumption in Washington has been clear. American forces possess the most sophisticated detection and interception systems on Earth. But even the best defenses depend on one crucial factor: the enemy not knowing exactly how those defenses work in real time. If that secrecy disappears, even powerful systems can become predictable. And predictability in warfare is dangerous. Now let's move to evidence point 2, the pattern of the attacks. Defense analysts have noticed something unusual about the reported Iranian operations. Instead of random missile launches or scattered drone assaults, the strikes appear to show high levels of coordination and timing precision. Hypersonic missiles, slower ballistic systems, and drone swarms seem to have been launched in carefully sequenced waves. This tactic is known in military planning as defense saturation. The idea is simple. Even the strongest air defense system has limits. If enough incoming threats arrive at once, from multiple angles and at different speeds, some will inevitably slip through. But executing this strategy successfully requires more than weapons. It requires detailed knowledge of radar coverage zones, interception timing, and command response patterns. That is why some analysts believe the intelligence sharing reports cannot be dismissed easily. Because the battlefield behavior appears to match what would happen if someone had access to extremely detailed situational awareness. Now here's where things become even more complicated. Evidence point 3 involves the strategic relationship between Moscow and Tehran. Over the past several years, Russia and Iran have gradually deepened their military cooperation. Joint exercises, weapons transfers, technology exchanges, these developments have been documented openly. But intelligence cooperation is different. Unlike weapons shipments, intelligence partnerships often leave very few visible traces. Former NATO commander Admiral James Stavridis once warned during a strategic forum discussion, "When two adversarial powers begin sharing operational intelligence, it multiplies their effectiveness in ways that are very difficult to detect from the outside." If such coordination is taking place, it would represent a significant challenge to US strategic planning in the region. Because the traditional assumption guiding American operations has always been that adversaries operate largely independently. But if Russia's global surveillance capabilities are now indirectly influencing battlefield decisions in the Middle East, that assumption no longer holds. And that brings us to evidence point 4, the Pentagon's response. When journalists recently asked US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth about the possibility of intelligence sharing between Moscow and Tehran, his response was measured but revealing. He emphasized that the United States possesses the best intelligence capabilities in the world, and that American command structures are closely monitoring communication channels and strategic movements. On the surface, that statement sounds reassuring, but analysts noticed something interesting. He did not explicitly deny that intelligence coordination could be occurring. Instead, the emphasis was placed on monitoring and awareness. In other words, Washington may understand that cooperation is happening, but preventing it is an entirely different challenge. Meanwhile, the reported battlefield outcomes continue to raise difficult questions. If radar installations are being damaged, if drone strikes are finding their targets, if advanced missile systems are slipping through defensive networks, then something in the strategic environment has clearly changed. This is why some geopolitical observers argue that the real story is not about a single attack or even a single country. It's about a new alignment of capabilities. Russia possesses one of the world's most extensive surveillance and intelligence infrastructures. Iran possesses a rapidly expanding arsenal of missiles and unmanned systems. When those two elements combine, the result could be a far more complex strategic puzzle for American planners in the region. And here is the most important part of this entire discussion. Military balance rarely shifts gradually. More often, it changes suddenly, when new technology, new alliances, or new information flows alter the underlying rules of the game. That may be why the situation is attracting so much quiet attention inside defense circles. Because if battlefield intelligence is truly changing hands in real time, then the question is no longer just about one series of attacks. The real question becomes this: has the strategic advantage that the United States relied on for decades in the Middle East just been fundamentally challenged? And if that advantage is eroding, the consequences could extend far beyond a single conflict zone. At that point, the issue becomes something much larger: the future balance of power in one of the most strategically important regions on Earth. If you're starting to see why analysts are paying such close attention to this story, press like on this video. Because the deeper we go, the more it becomes clear that this situation may not end with a single round of strikes. The real question is, what happens next? So where does this situation go from here? Strategists inside Washington, Moscow, and several Middle Eastern capitals are now quietly examining three possible paths forward. Each of these scenarios depends on how the next few weeks unfold, and more importantly, whether the intelligence cooperation reports continue to translate into battlefield consequences. Let's start with scenario 1, strategic de-escalation. In this scenario, the United States chooses a path of controlled restraint. Washington increases diplomatic pressure on both Moscow and Tehran while reinforcing defensive systems across the region. Additional radar networks, interceptor batteries, and naval assets are quietly deployed to restore deterrence. Behind closed doors, negotiations intensify. International pressure mounts. Intelligence sharing channels between Russia and Iran, if they exist, become a focal point of diplomatic confrontation. This would be the least dangerous outcome. But it also requires something difficult in the current geopolitical climate: cooperation between rival powers. Now consider scenario 2, limited escalation. Here, the United States does not accept the erosion of its strategic advantage. Instead, it responds by adjusting its operational doctrine in the region. Cyber operations increase. Electronic warfare systems begin targeting surveillance networks believed to be assisting Iranian targeting systems. Military analysts call this counterintelligence warfare. Rather than striking directly at Iran or Russia, Washington focuses on disrupting the flow of information itself, jamming signals, disabling communication nodes, and neutralizing the data pipelines that might be enabling precision attacks. This scenario creates a dangerous technological contest, because if Russia responds by expanding its intelligence support even further, the Middle East could become the testing ground for a new form of information-driven warfare. But there is a third possibility, the one that concerns many defense planners the most. Scenario 3, full strategic breakdown. In this outcome, the situation spirals beyond limited confrontation. More attacks occur. Defensive systems fail again. Critical military infrastructure is damaged. Regional allies demand stronger responses from Washington. At that point, pressure builds for direct retaliation. If the United States begins targeting Iranian launch systems or command facilities, escalation could accelerate rapidly. And if Moscow perceives that its strategic partner is under direct threat, the geopolitical stakes could rise dramatically. This is the nightmare scenario, not because it guarantees a global conflict, but because it introduces multiple great powers into the same volatile battlefield environment. History has shown many times that when intelligence networks, military alliances, and regional tensions collide at the same moment, the margin for miscalculation becomes dangerously small. And right now, that margin may already be shrinking. So here's the reality. If the reports about intelligence coordination are even partially true, then the strategic landscape of the Middle East may already be changing. The United States built its regional dominance on one critical advantage: superior awareness of the battlefield. But when that awareness is challenged, the entire balance of power begins to shift. And that is why defense analysts are watching this moment so closely, because the clock is now ticking. Either Washington restores its strategic edge, or a new era of multi-power competition begins to take shape across the region. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Russia has crossed a dangerous line by helping Iran? Or is this simply the inevitable response to years of geopolitical pressure? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over.